There is an invisible thief standing in the exact same room as you, breathing your air and slowly, methodically draining your vital life force, drop by drop. Many of you know the exact suffocating sensation I am speaking of. You walk into a room feeling completely centered, grounded, and at peace. Then, you spend a mere 5 minutes in the presence of a specific individual, a coworker, a family member, or a supposed friend, and suddenly you feel a crushing, inexplicable weight bearing down on your chest. Your mind becomes a dense, impenetrable fog. Your shoulders ache with an invisible burden, and you feel profoundly, devastatingly exhausted, despite having done absolutely zero physical labor. You walk away from the interaction feeling hollowed out, questioning your own sanity, and carrying a chaotic, nervous tension that does not belong to you. You try to defend yourself with logic. You try to explain your boundaries. You try to be the peacemaker. And yet, somehow, you always leave the battlefield feeling like you are the one who is entirely at fault. Society tells you that you just need to be more understanding, more patient, more empathetic. Society is lying to you. Listen to me with absolute, unwavering clarity. This devastating exhaustion is not a sign of your weakness, and it is certainly not a defect in your character. It is a highly specific, biological hijacking of your nervous system. You possess a brilliant evolutionary mechanism known as mirror neurons, designed to create empathy and social cohesion. This mechanism creates what neuroscientists call limbic resonance, the ability of your brain to literally synchronize with the emotional frequency of the human beings around you. In a healthy environment, this allows for deep connection and love. But in the presence of an emotional predator, a narcissist, or a deeply toxic individual, this exact same biological mechanism is weaponized against you. They are not looking for a conversation. They are looking for a host. They are internally drowning in their own unmanaged chaos, and their primitive brain knows that the only way to survive the crushing pressure of their own misery is to successfully transmit that emotional virus directly into your limbic system. They outsource their psychological pain onto you, and your unmastered empathy absorbs it like a sponge. Today, we are going to permanently sever this parasitic cord. I will reveal the 4 absolute laws of energetic transmutation. I will teach you how to stop bleeding your precious peace into the dirt and how to convert their venom into your most lethal, silent power. But listen with absolute, unshakable reverence. The 4th law is the ultimate, brutal frontier. It is the terrifying threshold where an estimated 95% of people completely fail because it demands the violent sacrifice of an illusion that your ego desperately loves. If you are truly ready to drop the illusion, step out of the slaughterhouse of their toxicity, and become entirely untouchable, walk with me now. Settle your breathing. Anchor your physical weight deep into the floor beneath you. Drop your shoulders, uncross your arms, and let the frantic, chaotic noise of the world fall completely silent. To forge the impenetrable armor of the sovereign mind, we must first deeply understand the mechanics of the weapon that is trying to break you. This brings us to the 1st law of energetic transmutation, understanding the architecture of the emotional vampire and the principle of contagion. When you are attacked by a toxic individual, when they drop a passive-aggressive insult, when they suddenly erupt into a theatrical rage over a microscopic inconvenience, or when they weave a complex manipulative narrative designed to make you feel guilty, your immediate instinct is to take it personally. Your ego flares up. You believe they are attacking you because of something you did, or because of a fundamental flaw in your character. You must completely eradicate this neurobiological hallucination from your mind. Toxic people are never attacking you because of who you are. They are attacking you because they absolutely cannot survive the terrifying reality of who they are. In psychology, this is known as projection. The toxic mind is a dark, suffocating, disorganized room filled with profound self-loathing, deep insecurity, and unhealed trauma. Because they lack the martial discipline and the courage to look into their own darkness and clean their own room, the internal pressure becomes agonizing. To relieve this excruciating psychological pain, they must manufacture chaos in the external world. They must provoke you. They must make you angry, confused, or defensive. Why? Because the moment you lose your temper, the moment you begin to desperately defend yourself, you have validated their projection. You have caught the grenade they threw. Now they get to point their finger at your reaction and say, "Look how crazy you are. Look how angry you are." They have successfully transferred their internal disease into your physical body. This is the absolute principle of contagion. The emotional predator does not want a resolution. They want a reaction. They do not want peace. They want an accomplice in their misery. And the greatest, most exhausting mistake you can possibly make is attempting to fight this biological contagion with the weapons of logic and reason. How many times have you sat down with a manipulative person and carefully, meticulously explained your perspective? You bring facts. You bring chronological evidence. You use a calm, measured voice, hoping that if you just arrange the English language in the perfect, logical sequence, they will suddenly experience a profound moral epiphany. You believe that if you show them the truth, they will apologize and change their behavior. Listen to the heavy, brutal reality of human nature. Trying to use logic to defeat a person whose entire survival strategy relies on emotional chaos is exactly like trying to put out a roaring forest fire by shooting it with a water pistol filled with gasoline. Your logical arguments require them to accept accountability, which is the exact thing their fragile ego will fight to the death to avoid. Every time you explain yourself, every time you desperately try to make them understand, you are simply giving them more data to twist, more words to manipulate, and more energy to consume. You are actively participating in your own psychological draining. You are feeding the vampire. To stop the bleeding, you must fundamentally change your perception of the battlefield. You must realize that their words are not facts to be debated. Their words are merely the desperate, thrashing symptoms of their own internal disease. You do not argue with a virus. You do not negotiate with a parasite. You immunize yourself against it. But immunization in the realm of mental warfare does not mean building a rigid, heavy wall that you have to constantly defend. True, terrifying invincibility requires a much deeper, ancient strategy. Once you finally accept that their chaos has absolutely nothing to do with you, you must learn the martial discipline of making their attack land on absolutely nothing. This brings us to the second law of energetic transmutation, the art of the void and the ancient Shaolin principle of non-resistance. When a toxic person, an emotional predator, or a narcissist throws their manufactured drama at you, they are heavily anticipating a collision. They are relying entirely on the physics of emotional friction. If they push you, they expect you to tense your muscles and push back. If they hurl a passive-aggressive accusation, they expect you to immediately raise your shield and defend your character. It is exactly this friction, the heat generated by your desperate resistance, that feeds their limbic system and gives them the chemical dopamine hit they are craving. Your defense is their feast. Every single time you argue, justify, or explain yourself, you are providing the solid, rigid surface they need to bounce their toxic energy off of. You are validating their reality. In the martial arts of the Shaolin Temple, we observe the profound, terrifying power of the natural world to understand how to govern the mind. Consider the difference between a solid stone wall and a deep, quiet body of water. If you take a heavy iron hammer and strike a solid stone wall with all of your physical might, the collision is incredibly violent. The stone may crack, the iron may spark, and a massive shockwave will violently shudder through the bones of your arm. The stone resists the hammer, and because it resists, it takes damage. But what happens if you take that exact same heavy iron hammer and strike the surface of a deep, ancient lake? The water does not fight the hammer. It does not tense up in fear. It does not raise a shield to defend its honor. It simply yields. It opens perfectly, allowing the violent kinetic energy to plunge directly into the absolute emptiness of the depths. The water absorbs the impact without sustaining a single scratch, and within seconds, the ripples fade, and the surface is perfectly calm again, as if the strike never even happened. The hammer achieves absolutely nothing, and the person swinging it is left completely exhausted, wet, and defeated by their own futile effort. You have spent your entire life trying to be the stone wall. You have tried to be strong by resisting, by arguing, by fighting back against the toxic people who drain you. You must now become the deep water. You must transition from being an emotional sponge that absorbs their poison to becoming a dark, unshakable abyss that simply swallows their impact into nothingness. When the emotional predator launches their psychological hammer, when they try to provoke you, insult you, or drag you into the suffocating mud of their own manufactured chaos, you must instantly, violently remove all internal resistance. You do not offer them a stone wall of logic to strike against. You offer them the terrifying, unshakable void of your absolute indifference. We call this the posture of heavy silence. It is not the silence of fear. It is not the silence of submission, or the silence of someone who does not know what to say. It is a highly active, dominant, predatory silence. When they speak their venom, you do not interrupt them. You ground your feet heavily into the floor. You relax the muscles in your jaw and your face. You slow your breathing to a deep, mechanical rhythm. You look directly into their eyes, and you let their toxic words hang in the physical space between you, completely suspended in the air. You do not nod your head in agreement. You do not shake your head in disagreement. You do not roll your eyes or show frustration. You simply observe them with the cold, detached, clinical curiosity of a scientist watching a frantic, confused insect trapped inside a glass jar. Do you understand the sheer psychological terror this inflicts upon a toxic mind? Their entire strategy, their entire survival mechanism, is built on the fundamental assumption that they possess the power to control your internal weather. When they strike you and you do not shatter, when they provoke you and you refuse to bleed, their entire psychological universe collapses. They are swinging their heavy iron hammer with all of their might, burning massive amounts of their own biological energy, and they are hitting absolutely nothing. They are falling violently into the void. Without the friction of your reaction, their fire has no oxygen. They begin to suffocate on the fumes of their own toxicity. In psychology, when you stop rewarding a toxic behavior with your reaction, the predator will often experience what is called an extinction burst. They will temporarily escalate their behavior. They will speak louder. They will say something even more offensive. They will desperately try to find the button that makes you react, because their brain is panicking. You must hold the line of the void. You watch them exhaust their vocabulary. You watch them unravel. You let them drown in the terrifying echo of their own voice, entirely unsupported by your energy. Most people fail to deploy the weapon of heavy silence because their fragile ego screams for justice. Your unmastered ego tells you that if you do not respond to an insult, you are losing. It tells you that if you do not correct their false narrative, you are weak. But true. Sovereign power is realizing that you do not need to participate in every argument you are invited to. You do not need to attend every war. You are the sovereign emperor of your own mind. Imagine a majestic, impenetrable fortress. If a confused peasant stands outside the gates and begins throwing small stones at the massive iron doors, demanding that the emperor come down and explain himself, what does the emperor do? Does he run down to the mud, open the gates, and desperately try to justify his reign to a peasant? Absolutely not. He remains sitting heavily on his throne, entirely unbothered by the pathetic noise outside. His silence is the absolute, undeniable proof of his power. When you fight with a toxic person, you elevate them to your level, and you degrade yourself to theirs. When you apply the heavy silence, you leave them exactly where they belong, outside the gates of your peace. You let them defeat themselves, and when they finally realize that their chaos has absolutely no jurisdiction in your empire, they will inevitably retreat. They will pack up their misery and walk away to look for an easier host, because a psychological parasite simply cannot survive on a host that refuses to bleed. You have successfully executed the heavy silence. You have watched the emotional predator completely exhaust their chaotic arsenal against the impenetrable void of your indifference. You did not speak. You did not argue. You did not break your sovereign posture. But let us step away from the external victory and confront the absolute, brutal reality of your internal human biology. Even though you offered absolutely no external friction to the toxic individual, your ancient survival hardware still recognized a hostile threat. Your amygdala still fired. The massive spike of cortisol and adrenaline has still been violently released into your bloodstream. Your heart rate is still elevated, and your muscles are still holding a microscopic, invisible tension. If you simply walk away from this toxic encounter, sit down on your couch, and attempt to resume your normal day, you are making a catastrophic, silent error. Because you did not burn off that chemical energy in a physical fight or a screaming match, that highly pressurized cocktail of stress hormones is now trapped inside your body. It has absolutely nowhere to go. If it remains stagnant, it will turn inward. It will rot into what modern psychology calls rumination. You will find yourself lying awake in the dark at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying their toxic words over and over again in your mind. You will ask yourself, why did they say that to me? How could they be so cruel? You will meticulously dissect their behavior, trying to find a logical explanation for their madness. Listen to the cold truth. By ruminating, you have effectively swallowed their poison, and you are actively allowing it to slowly destroy your internal organs from the inside out. You have protected the gates of your fortress, but you have let the disease seep into the water supply. To become completely untouchable, you must learn the ancient, brutal alchemy of taking that dark, stagnant energy and forcing it to build your empire. You must learn exactly what to do with the venom. This brings us to the third law of energetic transmutation, the root of the alchemist and the physical grounding of the poison. In the ancient philosophical texts of Taoism, we are taught to observe the majestic ancient oak tree during a catastrophic, deafening thunderstorm. When a violent, million-volt bolt of lightning suddenly strikes the highest branch of the tree, the sheer thermal and kinetic energy is completely overwhelming. If the tree were rigid, if it attempted to hold that massive electrical charge inside its wooden trunk, the sap would instantly boil, the wood would violently explode, and the tree would be shattered into 1,000 burning splinters. The tree survives the terrifying violence of the storm because it does not hold the energy. It possesses a massive invisible network of deep, heavy roots anchored firmly in the earth. The exact millisecond the lightning strikes the canopy, the tree serves as a pure, unresisting conduit, instantly sending the entire million-volt charge straight down the trunk and grounding it safely into the dirt. The overthinker, the victim of toxic abuse, is a tree with shallow roots. They take the lightning strike of a toxic interaction and they hold it in their chest and their mind until their nervous system essentially explodes with anxiety and exhaustion. The sovereign master is the ancient oak. When you absorb the chaotic, hostile energy of a narcissist or a manipulator, you must act as the absolute conduit. You must build the roots of the alchemist. You must take that sudden, violent spike of adrenaline and ground it directly into the physical earth of your own relentless discipline. You do not sit in your room and ask why. Asking why a toxic person behaves toxically is a pathetic, exhausting attempt to find logic in a fundamentally broken machine. It is a waste of your vital life force. Instead, you take that dark, heavy, vibrating energy and you physically move it out of your mind and into your muscles. You walk straight into the gym. You grip the cold, heavy iron, and you pull the weight from the floor. You use the lingering anger, the frustration, and the spike of cortisol to push your physical body past its normal limits. You breathe heavily. You sweat out the venom. You let the sheer mechanical friction of the exercise completely burn off the adrenaline that the emotional predator deposited into your bloodstream. Or perhaps you take that aggressive, hostile frequency and you sit down at your desk. You channel the intense, uncomfortable energy into a brutal 6-hour block of deep, uninterrupted, highly focused work. You use the fire of their disrespect to melt the heavy iron of your own procrastination. You aggressively organize your life. You build your business. You study your craft. You write the pages you have been avoiding. You take the absolute worst, most toxic elements of human behavior, and you force them to turn the heavy gears of your own ambition. This is the ultimate terrifying application of practical stoicism. You look at the obstacle. You look at the person who is desperately trying to break you, and you realize that they are entirely powerless. They think they are draining you, but in reality they are simply handing you a massive, free battery of kinetic energy. They are handing you the raw, high-octane fuel that you require to build your empire. You transmute the poison of their profound insecurity into the rich, dark fertilizer of your own relentless growth. Every ounce of their doubt translates into another repetition. Every single passive-aggressive comment translates into another dollar earned. Every attempt to drag you down simply accelerates your terrifying ascent. When you achieve this level of internal alchemy, the entire game of human interaction changes forever. You no longer fear toxic environments, because you realize that you possess the biological machinery to convert their chaos into your power. The emotional predator becomes nothing more than an unknowing, unpaid laborer, blindly shoveling coal into the roaring furnace of your destiny. You smile at their attempts to provoke you, because you know exactly where that energy is going to end up. You have forged a mind that is practically invincible. But even if you master the void, and even if you learn to ground the lightning, there is one final, terrifying trap waiting for you in the dark. It is the invisible, psychological chain that keeps you tethered to the toxic person for years, sometimes decades, long after the physical argument is over. We must now walk into the ultimate execution chamber, the absolute frontier where an estimated 95% of people fail to protect their peace. We must execute the savior complex and permanently kill the deepest, most pathetic addiction of your own mind. Why do so many of you repeatedly break your silence? Why do you establish a firm, heavy boundary only to tear it down a week later, the moment the toxic person sends a sad, manipulative text message or plays the role of the helpless victim? You do this because society has infected you with a deeply toxic definition of empathy. You believe it is your moral duty to fix, heal, and rehabilitate the broken people around you. But I need you to look closely, with cold, surgical honesty, at the neurobiology of your own ego. The desire to save a toxic person is rarely about genuine compassion. At its absolute, unvarnished core, the savior complex is a manifestation of hidden narcissism. You subconsciously believe that your love, your logic, and your presence are so incredibly powerful, so magnificently unique, that they can magically rewrite decades of severe psychological trauma and deeply ingrained predatory behavior. You want to be the hero of their story. You want to be the one exceptional human being who finally breaks through their armor and makes them see the light. The estimated 95% of people who fail to transmute toxic energy into silent power do so because they are absolutely addicted to the illusion of the epiphany. They hold on to the relationship because they are starving for the last word. They desperately want the toxic person to confess that they were wrong, to validate the pain they caused. Listen to the devastating, liberating truth of human psychology. A toxic mind does not process the truth. A toxic mind processes power. When you break your silence to offer help, when you send that long, compassionate paragraph trying to guide them toward self-awareness, they do not read your words as an act of love. They read your words as a massive, glaring surrender of your sovereignty. They see that you still care. They see that they still occupy valuable real estate inside your head. You have walked right back into the psychological slaughterhouse, and you have willingly placed the heavy iron chains back around your own neck. To become entirely untouchable, you must adopt the brutal, sovereign realism of the universe. In the vast cosmos, there are celestial bodies known as black holes. A black hole is a region of space where gravity pulls so intensely that absolutely nothing, not even light itself, can escape its grasp. A black hole does not generate warmth. It does not reflect beauty. It simply consumes everything that comes near its event horizon, slowly crushing entire solar systems into a microscopic point of infinite density. If you take a brilliant burning star and place it next to a black hole, hoping to illuminate the darkness, the black hole will not suddenly become bright. It will violently, ruthlessly rip the star apart at the atomic level, swallowing its light forever, and leaving nothing but an empty, silent void. There are human beings walking on this earth who operate with the exact same physics as a black hole. They are emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually bankrupt. They consume the light, the energy, and the empathy of every single person who steps into their orbit. Your compassion will not heal them. It will simply be devoured. Your logic will not enlighten them. It will simply be twisted into darkness. The absolute pinnacle of mental warfare, the ultimate transmuting of toxic energy into silent power, is the cold, unapologetic acceptance of this reality. You must release the exhausting, arrogant responsibility for their evolution. You must accept that some people have deeply, consciously or subconsciously chosen the darkness, and it is not your job to set yourself on fire simply to keep them warm. You must execute the savior complex. You stop trying to provide them with closure. You stop trying to ensure that they understand your side of the story. You do not offer an exit interview. You do not demand a final apology. You simply take a step back. You look at the consuming void of their chaos, and you quietly, heavily close the iron doors of your empire. You lock them out, and you throw away the key in absolute, terrifying silence. The psychological pain they experience when you finally strip away your empathy and offer them nothing but the heavy, unmovable door of your absence is the ultimate consequence of their own toxicity. They are left alone in the dark room of their own mind, forced to choke on the very venom they tried to inject into you. But you are not there to watch. You have already moved on. Your vital energy completely preserved. Your mind, an impenetrable fortress of peace. I know the agonizing, invisible weight you have been carrying. I know the profound exhaustion of spending your entire life being the emotional anchor for deeply fractured, chaotic human beings. You were taught from a young age that giving until you bled was the highest virtue. You have been drained, manipulated, and left holding the heavy wreckage of battles that were never yours to fight. Your profound empathy, your most beautiful and majestic trait, was violently hacked by predators and used against you as a weapon of mass destruction. You have felt like a victim of your own big heart. But you are no longer a victim. You have been initiated into the ancient alchemy of the sovereign mind. You have reclaimed the absolute, final authority over who is granted access to your light. The venom of the world is in the air right now. The predators are walking among us, desperately searching for their next host. Tomorrow, when they inevitably approach the gates of your mind and attempt to force the lock, what will you do? Will you open the door, step back into the slaughterhouse, and let them steal your light once again? Or will you sit heavily on the throne of your absolute, terrifying silence and let them suffocate entirely in their own chaotic darkness? The choice is yours. The path is open. Ami tuofo.